What's going on out there, world? Jeff Lerner here, and in this video we are talking about the basic steps that you need to do to get started investing in real estate. This is one of my favorite subjects. I've been investing in real estate now since I guess I was 24, 25, so mid-20s, over 15 years. It's been financially the most stable and consistent part of my life. In fact, there have been times when all hell was breaking loose and everything else seemed to be going wrong, but my trusty real estate investments got me through. So let's talk about how to get started. Don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. I am a huge believer of that. When I was in my mid-20s, I got started. Somebody told me that, and I heard it from multiple places, and I read Robert Kiyosaki's books, which if you haven't done that, you should strongly consider doing that. And it all converged to say, hey, Jeff, even though you're broke, even though you're struggling, even though sometimes you don't have money for food, you should do whatever you have to do to scrounge up the means to be able to get involved in real estate. Now, at that time, gosh, 15, 16 years ago, so what was that? Mid-2000s. It was pre-Great Recession, which happened kind of 2007, 2008. And the Great Recession, as you may remember, was triggered by some sort of craziness, I guess, if you will, a bubble, a real estate bubble, because loans were so easy to get. And that you didn't have to necessarily verify your income. You didn't necessarily have to qualify. They didn't have the strict credit qualifications that they do now. You could literally get loans for like no money down, and you wouldn't even have to submit paperwork in some cases. It got crazy. But I guess fortunately for me at that time, I was able to actually get a hold of some rental properties that, frankly, as a struggling, broke jazz musician at the time who didn't have any sort of steady, stable job, I couldn't produce pay stubs of any, significant size. Like, it would have been really hard for me to get rental properties now the way things are. But back then I was able to get a few of them. And thankfully, even after all the craziness and the crash of 2007, 2008, I held on to them. And there have literally been, I don't know about entire years, but like significant chunks of time, 4 months, 6 months since then, since 2008, when I started my online business, my online marketing career. There have been times when things were so volatile and so crazy for me that literally my food and my rent were paid for by these rental properties that I got back in my early mid-20s when I was a jazz musician. So I have lived the truth of the power of real estate investing. And that's why it's such a passionate subject for me. Of course, we live in a different time now. There's a little more that you have to do to actually qualify and be able to get started with it. But that doesn't mean that you should be discouraged or dissuaded from taking those steps, because frankly, as crazy as the world may have been back then, I think it's even crazier now. Coronavirus, we got massive turnover. Even when employment numbers are high, we've got massive turnover of, the average person doesn't stay in a job very long. You've got massive income disparity between, the sort of the white collar executive class and the everybody else class. Like, we've got global geopolitical concerns and craziness and people threatening, and just, it's a mess. And yet at the center of it, and I remember reading this in the early 2000s in Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which was a big influence on me. You've got real estate. Real estate, it's like, they can't print more of it. They can't, just say, oh, we've got financial turmoil. Let's try to bail everybody out by printing $1 trillion of new real estate. They can't do that. Real estate is fixed. It's static. It exists now, and other than like very slow tectonic processes in the world, or maybe the only way you say, oh, real estate's created or destroyed is through like the ice caps melting or something. Other than those kinds of things, they can't make more of it and they can't subtract it. So if you own real estate, like, you own a piece of the earth. And that is why historically real estate, even more so than gold and precious metals, real estate has been the asset of kings. By far the most wealth has been created in all of the world, in all of world history. It's through real estate. So again, don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. And in this video, I'm going to take you through the basic steps that you need to do in order to do so in the world that we live in today. Okay? First of all, knowledge is power. You should not be saving money for real estate, definitely not spending money on real estate if you haven't become an expert or at least pretty knowledgeable about real estate in your area. So you're going to want to get to know your local area. And now, which frankly, they didn't have this back when I started. I mean, it existed, but they didn't have the tools like they do now. Starts on the internet. You can go online and you can number crunch deals. You can analyze, the estimated rents that you could bring in from a property. You can look at the cost to acquire. You can run a financing calculator to say, okay, well, based on the cost and based on the down payment, how much money am I going to be spending? You can do credit analysis to see what interest rates you're going to qualify for. You can, get pretty accurate appraisals online. Like you can almost vet an entire deal now sitting at your computer. And so I suggest that what you start doing is really, really researching your local area, get to know the different pockets. I have other videos on YouTube where I talk about how to find kind of the best areas to invest in locally. I tend to recommend kind of like your blue collar, middle class areas where you have a nice mix of home ownership and also rental properties. You don't want to be in an area that's all rental properties because then the quality of the area tends to kind of go down because nobody's got like a vested interest, nobody's got a stake. But you don't want to be in an area that's almost all homeowners because typically those values are too high to be able to get a cash on cash return or generate a profit by renting them out. So you want to find an area that has a nice mix. One of the things that I don't know if this is true everywhere, but in general, one of the general things that you can look for is neighborhoods that have a lot of vans in the driveways. Vans of guys that are like utility workers. If you see a neighborhood that has like cops, like police and fire people, the cars, like police cars in the driveways, kind of that middle class, blue collar, people that work for the phone company, the power company, with handymen, construction contractors. Those types of people tend to occupy these neighborhoods that have the right mix of homeowners and renters that tend to make for good investment areas. So get to know your local neighborhoods, your local area. Drive around, look for areas that have those cars in the driveways, and then physically drive out to those areas. Like actually, I swear, there's two things that come from actually going out to those areas. First of all, you get a feel for the areas in a way that you just can't get just on the internet. Again, I do recommend that you be crunching the numbers on at least a deal a day on the internet, just so you get really proficient at it. But going out, driving around the areas, you'll also talk to people. You'll be able to physically talk to people and get a feel for the neighborhood. And it's crazy how often, as you have those conversations, and you kind of say who you are, what you're doing, you'll end up stumbling into really good deals that haven't even hit the market yet. And this isn't something that's going to happen on the first time. But if you go to an area, you start talking to a few people, inevitably, if you do that, let's say you do that 50 times, you go out and you do it maybe twice a week for 6 months. You've done that, had 50 of those conversations. You're going to stumble across a guy who's like, yeah, Marjorie down the street, she may not want me to tell you this, but I heard she's having a little bit of trouble and she might be looking to sell or something. You never know the circumstance, but you'll end up, if you kind of develop a sense of confidence and a willingness to do this, you march right up to Marjorie's house. You say, hey, listen, there's a little bit of chatter out there that maybe you're interested in selling the house. I just want to introduce myself. My name's Jeff. I'm a local investor. If you'd have any interest, I'd love to sit down and talk to you. And those are the deals when you're getting started where you find motivated sellers, you find people that'll work with you, and you're able to get a lot of times way better deals than you would get just off the internet. And one of the important things to know about real estate is you make your money when you buy. And what that means is basically like, if you buy right, it's kind of like stock investing. If you buy right, if you know there's value there, you almost can't screw it up. But if you don't, then you're waiting or hoping or praying that certain things click or certain things go right, or that you get just the right renter and they never move out and they never trash the property. But if you buy right, then you always are safe because you always know that if worse comes to worse, you can dump the property and at least get your money out. It's worth it to kind of take your time, be patient, put yourself out there. Don't buy the first deal that you come across, and be looking for these opportune situations where you can, get a really, really great deal. But like so many things, it's not the smartest person that's going to get that deal. it's the most confident person that's going to get that deal who actually goes out and hustles and does the work. So do your research, get to know your area, crunch numbers on lots of deals, and then physically get out there and talk to people, because that's where a lot of the magic happens. And then the next thing that you want to do to get started investing in real estate and make sure that you start now, even if it takes a year, 2 years, whatever, is to work on your credit. You've got to have your credit in order, or else you're just not going to get very far. There's videos out there, and there's programs you can buy, and there's people that'll try to sell you on the idea that you can do all this amazing stuff in real estate with no money, no credit, no job, no life, no pulse, no brain. And it's not true. Real estate is a leverage dependent business model. The great thing about real estate is that you can get other people's money to be able to acquire assets far beyond what you could probably afford to acquire yourself if you had to come up with all the cash. But the flip side of that is whoever's giving you their money, whether it's a bank, whether it's a private investor, whatever, they're taking a chance on you. And they're not going to take a chance on somebody with no job, no money, no credit, no pulse, and no brain, right? You have to be able to show that you have some substance as a functioning member of the economy to get people to give you their money to go buy stuff for yourself with, right? And especially things that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars or even more sometimes. So start working now on your credit. And I have a video here on this channel. It's an interview with a guy named Curtis Nally that is literally like the most in-depth explanation I had ever heard in my entire life of how to build credit if you have no credit, or fix credit if you have bad credit, and establish good credit, and then convert that credit into access to capital. It's right here on this channel. We can put a link to it below. And if you are like, well, how do I build my credit? That's where I'm going to send you. It'll teach you far more than I could explain in this video. But start building your credit now so that when you do find a good deal, you're able to move quickly. That's one of the biggest things I see in real estate, is that the better the deal, the faster it goes. You can't keep a good deal a secret. Let's say you go talk to Marjorie, like we talked about. You walk down the street, you go talk to Marjorie. As soon as Marjorie gets a sense that maybe there's an out and her situation can be resolved by working with an investor, if you sit on that for 3 days and then you got to go fiddle around and deal with your stuff and try to get credit, try to get a pre-qualification letter, try to get access, borrowing power, try to get your credit in order, whatever. 3 days later, Marjorie's getting antsy. She's, I felt a glimmer of hope that I could maybe unload this thing. So I'm going to start calling realtors. I'm going to start calling investors, and poof, it's going to be gone in another day or two. So typically the better the deal, the faster it goes. Don't dilly-dally. Get your credit. Start working on building credit right now. And then the next thing that you want to do, and this goes with building credit, is establishing consistent income. One of the biggest things that I get sort of in what I do online with people contacting me is they're like, I have no money, I make no money, how do I get money? And I'm like, get a job. And then inevitably, well, I got no skills. Okay, get skills, then get a job. Like, we're not doing magic tricks over here. Like, you have to have money. No, again, nobody's going to give you money if they don't think you can pay back the loan, right? Get a job, establish an income history. And the way that you establish income history, first of all, is you get a job and you get pay stubs that demonstrate that you have income. And typically you're going to need to earn income for at least 2 years consistently, and establish 2 years of tax returns to be able to demonstrate that you have consistent work history. And also get credit cards. And again, in that video I alluded to, the interview with Curtis Nally, we talk about the best credit cards to get depending on your situation, but essentially establish a repayment history where you get cards, you use cards, you pay them back, and basically be working on establishing income as much as you're working on establishing credit. Those are the two main things that are going to get you, that you're going to get underwritten on when you go out to try to borrow money to be able to acquire property. And it goes with that, you got to have some money. Typically, you're going to need at least 5%, probably more like 10 or 20% down payment to be able to acquire property. And on top of that, very often you're going to need to pay up to another 3% for closing costs to go towards getting the loan. So it could be as high as 8 to 23% in cash that you're going to need in order to close the loan. And a lot of times, and when you sit down and close on the property, you're typically going to have to sign a document that basically says the funds that you use to close were not borrowed funds. In other words, you didn't secretly borrow the money from your parents and say, I'll pay you back, and just so that you could go qualify to get the loan over here. Basically, you're defrauding the lender if you have a debt obligation on the down payment money in most cases. And if they find that out, it actually gives them a right to call the note due and say, look, if you can't pay us the entire amount of the note, right now, we can come foreclose on the house. So you don't want to get in that situation. You actually need to generate income and demonstrate a consistent, stable income history and save up the money for the down payment. Let me just take a moment and sort of confront what I know many people are going to say in response to that. Like,
I don't make enough money. It's going to take me forever to save up the money for my down payment.
I can't change the world. I'm doing my best. What is true in the world is that you can make more money. Probably. There's almost no one that I talk to, and I talk to a lot of people because of what I do. There's almost no one that I talk to. I can't look at them, or I can't go through their life and get to know more about them and be like, well, here's how you can make more money. If you're working at McDonald's, if you're working at a car wash, if you're working at a gas station, if you're waiting tables, if you're, whatever you're doing, there's ways to make more money. This is why my channel exists. I teach skills. I try to share information that helps people make more money. I was a broke jazz musician. When I got started on this journey, I was 28 years old. I was in hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt because I tried starting these restaurants that were a total disaster right in the middle of the Great Recession, 2007. My only monetizable skill at that time that I really understood was that I could go play piano. And playing piano made me consistently about $40,000 a year. Well, when you owe $500,000 to the bank, and because it was a federally guaranteed Small Business Administration loan, you've actually got the government coming after you. Plus some of it was taxes. I had these big landlords coming after me, big real estate investment trusts that I had leases with. They were like, well, you owe us, it's a 5-year lease and you haven't even been here a year, so you owe us 4 more years at $4,000 a month, whatever that comes out to. It's like, and I'm like, well, I can go back to playing piano for $40,000 a year. So maybe if you give me 40 lifetimes, I can pay off this debt. Like, that wasn't gonna work. So I had to figure out how to make more money, and I went online, I learned skills, I learned digital marketing, I learned direct response, I learned copywriting, I learned how to run ads, I learned how to generate leads, I learned how to source good offers, I learned how to do all the skills that empower people in the 21st century now to live these amazing lives and do whatever they want. Well, that's the answer, that's the antidote. If you got an income sickness, that's the prescription, that's the medication that you need, is learn these skills. And I have gazillion videos on this YouTube channel that teach these skills and talk about these skills. So, I'm saying, don't wait to buy real estate and wait. But if you don't have the money to buy real estate, then don't wait to make more money, go learn skills and demand more money from the marketplace, because it's a totally doable thing. It's totally doable. For most of human history, it wasn't doable. For most of human history, if you were a blacksmith's apprentice in the Middle Ages, like hammering on iron, like something out of Game of Thrones, and that was what you did, then that was what you were going to do, and that's probably what your kids were going to do, and it's probably what their kids were going to do, right? That was the world for most of human history. It's not the world anymore. Don't act stuck. Don't be boo-hooing. Just go learn better skills and make more money. If you have the skills, nobody's not going to pay you for the skills. If you know how to generate leads at a profit on the internet, there are millions of small businesses, all in any state or country that you go to in the world, that need that skill and that will pay you for that skill. That's the thing. We live in a meritocracy now. If you have the skill, you'll get the contract. If you get the contract, you'll get the money. If you get the money, then you can buy the real estate. No excuses, no apologies. That's just how it is. Let me step off my pedestal, my pulpit, I should say, preaching about making more money. Let's assume that you are ready and that you want to actually go vet a property. So now what you got to do, and I have learned the hard way how disastrous it is not to do this, get good people to come check out the property. Pay for an inspection, pay for an appraisal, and honestly, if you're going to get into real estate investing, I strongly recommend that you make friends with a credible contractor, or at least a handyman, somebody that can come help you spec out things, not only what is wrong with the property, what the issues are, but a rough idea of what it's actually going to cost to fix it. Literally right now, I'm going through an issue on a property where it all looked great. I'm not like an engineer. I'm not very handy, frankly. And here's the thing: when I went and looked at the property, it was a sunny day. It was dry outside, and everything looked normal. Come to find out, the entire stairwell and the entire balcony walkway and all of the handrails get super slick when it's wet. And because the wood wasn't treated the right way, there's a little bit of rot in the wood. So, and it's on a second story. So now every time it rains, I find out people are like, slipping and sliding, and the whole thing's supposedly, if I leave it unchecked, it's going to come tumbling down at some point. So I've got two bids. One's for like 12 grand and one's for like 15 grand to go, essentially replace all this wood. Well, if I had just had somebody that knew more than me, that had checked out this property on day one, then I wouldn't be dealing with this right now, right? Or I could have incorporated it into the contract, or I could have at least tried to incorporate it into the loan so that I was borrowing the money to deal with the repairs instead of having to come out of pocket years later, right? Bring in people. We live in a world now where there's no possible way that you could know everything. So just go ahead and, whatever business you're in, get in the habit of finding people that are smarter than you, that are more specialized than you about things that matter, things that can make you money, things that can save you money, and consult with them. Pay them. It's worth a few $100. I wish I'd hired somebody, brought them in, paid them $300 to tell me, hey, you're going to end up having to spend 15 grand on these stairs if you don't deal with it now and try to deal with it with the seller, right? And then it's time to make an offer. Now, I'm not going to get into offer science. Making an offer is pretty straightforward. You're if you have a realtor, they'll walk you through things like, earnest money, option fees, due diligence periods, all the things that kind of go into making an offer. But here's what I'll tell you about making an offer. There's this weird emotional thing that happens when people make an offer, because it's exciting and I get it, but they're also nervous. Well, what if I offend the person? Or what if they don't accept my offer? Honestly, if they don't accept your offer, great, move on, go find another property. It's like dating. People are so scared of rejection. Well, what if he or she doesn't like me? I don't know. Are you actually concerned that we're going to run out of people? You just move on, right? But we get, we're so scared of and literally it feels like when you make an offer on a piece of property, it's almost like a dating proposal. People get so much emotion wrapped up into it. You got to be super, almost mercenary about real estate investing. It is all business. It is all numbers. Don't get attached. Even if you're going to do what I think is a great idea, which is buy a property, live in the property, especially if it's your first one, live in the property, either rent out a room. Maybe there's a property that has a basement or some other piece or a house in the back that you can rent out, whatever. But I think in general, it's a great strategy to live in properties and also try to treat them as investments, especially when you're just getting started out. But whatever the case, train yourself going in to be completely objective and non-emotional and make offers. Whatever the offer is that I think I want to make and I think seems fair, I like to just at least start 10% less than that. And yeah, you get more people saying no, but when they say yes, remember what I said, you make your money when you buy. I'd rather make 20 lowball offers. I'd rather be making offers that piss people off and offend them. The only caveat to that is you don't want to be so absurd that nobody, word gets around and nobody in the market wants to work with you. But honestly, it's got to be pretty ridiculous for that to happen. But be making offers that actually run the risk of offending people. Because that means you're probably making offers that if they said yes, it would be a really good deal and you would make your money when you buy, like I said before. So I'd rather make 10 offers that are 10 to 20% below what I think is actually a fair price, and maybe one of them gets accepted, than have a fair price get accepted and have it be 3 times as hard to make money or have to wait 3 times as long to be able to exit the property and really make money. Because a lot of people, when they're starting out, you don't realize that in real estate, you're dealing with marginal economics. So marginal economics says, and this is why realtors a lot of times aren't necessarily, I'm not gonna say they're not your best friend, but they don't always have your best interest at heart. Think about a realtor. A realtor is gonna make a few percentage points of a deal. So if you have a property, let's say it's a $300,000 property, and you wanna get it for $280,000, well, that's a $20,000 difference. But if a realtor is making 3% of that, they're making 3% of $300,000, so they're gonna make $9,000. Or if it drops down to $280,000, what is that actually doing? That's only changing their commission by $600. So is the realtor maybe gonna be incentivized to still tell you hey, you know what, just, this is a good deal at $300,000, let's say, or, if you're on the sell side, they're gonna encourage you to maybe just take it for $280,000. If you're on the buy side, they're gonna encourage you to just pay $300,000, because either way, the $600 isn't impacting their decision that much. They just want to move the house. But for you, that $20,000, let's say that a year later, you're selling it for $310,000. You're going to buy it at either $300,000 or $280,000, and you're going to sell it a year later for $310,000. Well, after closing costs and after fees on multiple transactions, if a year later you sell it for 310 and you bought it for 300, you probably didn't make any money. But if you bought it for 280 and sold it for 310, you probably did. It could be the difference between barely breaking even and maybe making $20,000. So it was only a $600 difference to the realtor, but to you it could have been a $20,000, could have been, thousands of percent swing in terms of the profitability of the project. That's because for you as a real estate investor, you're dealing with marginal economics where the growth happens at the fringes. There's the big base of the underlying value of the asset, but then at the fringes you have the value fluctuations. And so when you really understand that, you get really, really confident and almost passionate about making these more aggressive, lower offers because they increase the margin so much when the property actually does turn. So be aggressive at the margins. And then obviously, ultimately, once you get an offer accepted, you're gonna close and then you're gonna turn around and rent it out or sell it or do the work or whatever. But that's stuff for another conversation. I really just right now wanted to talk about kind of the lead up to getting the property because again, that's where all the money is made. Okay? So hopefully that helps get you fired up to go do this work. If you like this content, I invite you to subscribe to my channel. Make sure you click the little bell so you get notified when new videos come out. And go get started doing real estate. Like I said, don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait. Thanks for your time. I'll see you on the next video.